Chapter 1. Good luck with the opening now. A strange new shop had quietly appeared on Wilson Avenue in Manhattan. Its sign bore 4 Chinese characters. "There is a tavern," painted in block letters. Among the English signs and neon, it looked oddly out of place, neither memorable nor intrusive, and no one in the neighborhood seemed to know when it had arrived or when the previous coffee shop had closed. In a city that moved this fast, most people barely noticed anything beyond what they needed to get by. Only tourists, or the very well-off, had the luxury to look around. The tavern itself was about 120 square meters and simply furnished. A large TV hung on the wall opposite the door. Wine racks flanked it, mostly empty. A bookshelf filled the left wall, and a wooden door sat in the center. The right wall mirrored the left with another rack and a wooden door. An elegant wooden bar ran forward, with 9 stools tucked underneath, clearly designed for patrons who liked to sit and talk. There were 9 tables in the room, 8 pentagonal tables and 1 round table, with 41 chairs in total. The 8 pentagonal tables were arranged according to the directions of the Big Dipper and the North Star, each with a single chair at one side. The round table stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window on the left of the entrance, accompanied by a chair carved like a cat from some dark wood. Morning sunlight poured through the window, warming the space and giving it a touch of life. A wooden door beside the bar opened, and a very young man, about 1.85 meters tall, stepped out. Walking at his heels on short legs was a chubby, reddish-brown animal with a round face and white markings on its cheeks. It looked part cat and part something else entirely. "Ah, what a gorgeous day," the young man said, stretching as he picked up the remote on the bar and turned on the television. The creature, Xiaohei, rolled its eyes in a very human way, padded over to a cat perch, climbed up, and curled into the sunshine. It soon let out a small, contented snore. "Xiaohei, you are really too lazy," the man said with a smile, and went about his morning. He ate breakfast while the TV showed the usual morning gossip, flattering coverage of a certain American tycoon, arms dealer, inventor, playboy, philanthropist, presented as if his scandals were a public service. The segment passed quickly. When breakfast was done, the man looked around the tavern with satisfaction. He took a bundle of firecrackers from behind the bar, stepped out the door, and fastened them to the sign above. "It's been almost a week since I came here," he murmured. "I've been busy getting the place ready and haven't introduced myself to the neighbors. The opening's a good excuse." With that, he lit the fuse. The firecrackers snapped and popped in rapid succession, spilling their sound into the street. Far away, where a group of mages were training, that sound reached ears completely different from any normal human hearing. They practiced at Kamatage, a place of old learning for those who defended Earth from magical threats. A bald woman in a beige tracksuit watched calmly as her students moved through their drills. She was the supreme mage, an ancient one who had guarded the world for countless years. When the crackling noise touched her senses, it registered like a small bell in a long life. She nodded to the trainees and excused herself. Back at her residence, Master Gu Yi closed her eyes and extended her perception. The crackling carried a faint, unusual signature. Through it, she pinpointed a tavern on Wilson Avenue. As someone who had lived and studied for millennia, she recognized the Chinese characters on the sign at once. "There is a tavern." What was that about? Curious, she reached out to probe the place, but a soft, gentle barrier pushed back. She didn't force it. Instead, she left her residence and arrived in front of the tavern in the blink of an eye. Standing there, she watched through the bright windows. A strange animal lay on a purple cushion. It had looked at her peculiar for a second, then settled down. Guyi smiled faintly. For someone who had seen so much change across centuries, the unknown was both a challenge and an amusement. Whatever this place was, she had come to assess it. Inside, she walked in without ceremony and cast a quick glance at the cat-like creature. Oddly, the faint unease she had felt moments earlier dissipated. She studied the room more carefully, the layout, the empty racks, the books, and the unusual arrangement of the pentagonal tables aligned to the stars. Beyond that, nothing appeared threatening. "Welcome, Master Gu Yi," a voice said. Gu Yi turned, surprised to realize the young man she had been ignoring was there, standing at the bar as if he had always been part of the scenery. He was smiling, composed. "Who are you?" Guyi asked, her tone wary. "And what is your purpose on Earth?" Protecting the planet was her duty. She had used dangerous powers in the past to avert catastrophe and wasn't inclined to be cavalier when something new appeared on her watch. "My name is Jiang Ju," the young man said with a casual bow. "I own this tavern." He lifted a wineglass the way one might balance a thought, then placed it in her hand. "There's no grand reason I came here," he continued. "This place reminds me of my old home in another world. I can't go back, and honestly, I don't want to. I just want to settle down and enjoy life here. I mean no harm." "Are you from another universe?" Guyi asked, narrowing her eyes. "Exactly." Jiangju's smile never faltered. He adjusted the glass in her hand as if he were rearranging a memory rather than offering a drink. Guyi studied him closely. He exuded power and confidence, but she could not read him at a glance. She focused on the wine in the glass, probing for any trace of strange energy. There was nothing overt, no immediate danger. "I'll watch you for a few days," Guyi decided finally. "If you prove you're no threat to Earth, I will leave." Jiangju inclined his head. "Fair enough," he said, as steady and untroubled as the daylight that filled his tavern. The cat on the cushion shifted and resumed its nap, and outside, Wilson Avenue went on with its indifferent traffic. Inside the little space called There Is a Tavern, two very different arrivals, one ancient and wary, the other young and quietly determined, were about to test how readily two worlds might share a table. Chapter 2. Guests. Jiangju ignored Guyi's attempt to keep him under surveillance and instead rattled off the tavern's rules as if reciting scripture. 1. The seat to the left of the door belongs to Jiangju. No living thing may sit there without permission. 2. Each guest may receive 1 cup of wine prepared by Jiangju per day, no exceptions. 3. No fighting in the tavern. Violators will be dealt with. 4. The tavern may host no more than 49 people per day. If the limit is exceeded, the excess will be turned away. 5. Jiangju's bartending is governed by his mood. 6. Do not tease Xiaohei unless you want to die. The tavern accepts no responsibility for attempted suicides. 7. Guests may trade among themselves, but the tavern takes a 30% cut, no objections. 8. All are warmly invited to sample Jiangju's delicacies. I am not lying. 9. Final interpretation of these rules belongs to Jiangju and is not subject to dispute. As he spoke, 2 electronic screens lit up on either side of the television opposite the door, the left scrolling through the rules, the right announcing the day's wine, though there was only one on the menu today. "You really like to cook, don't you?" Guyi remarked, staring at item 8, highlighted in red. "Of course." For a moment, Jiangju seemed almost transformed. A faint golden light shimmered around him as he smiled. "Good food and good wine are happiness worth sharing. I like to see people smile when they taste what I make." Guyi glanced at the glass in front of her. The liquid inside was colorless, more like a pocket of air than wine. "So this one's on the house? Think of it as the entry fee I paid to you as guardian of this land. You may taste." Jiangju's grin widened. "I learned this from a god's single tear." Guyi snorted inwardly, but brought the glass to her lips. The wine was slightly bitter at first, then the taste stretched into a delicate aftertaste. What surprised her most wasn't the flavor, but the memory it unlocked. Bright, half-forgotten moments from long ago, back when she hadn't yet been the supreme mage, and magic was still new and wondrous to her. She closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. Tears came, one shimmering with a faint gold light, and fell from the corner of her eye. Jiangju, with practiced ease, caught the tear before she even registered its fall. Guyi didn't notice. She was lost inside those recalled scenes, feeling again the small, fierce joy and the lightness of the early days. It was a rare loss of composure for her, but not for Jiangju. To him, this was routine. He rose, strolled to the bookshelf opposite, pulled out a comic, and settled into the chair by the floor-to-ceiling window. The little creature called Xiaohei glanced up, plucked a short piece of emerald bamboo from a dish on the purple mat, and chewed happily. Before he could finish, however, the comic book came down with a sharp slap on his forehead. "Eat quietly. Stop making so much noise." Jiangju complained, though he was still half smiling. "And starve?" Xiaohei replied lazily, gnawing the bamboo. Isn't eating the point? He paid Jiangju no mind and continued munching. Jiangju turned a page. You don't have to be timid when you enjoy good food. Open your mouth and eat like a proper guest. Before the argument could go on, the wooden door on the other side of the bookshelf swung open. A young swordsman in a masked face strode in, holding a sword in one hand and a child's hand in the other. Behind them came a middle-aged man in disheveled clothes and a cautious, silent little girl. Where are we? The swordsman demanded, pointing his blade at Jiangju's odd attire and the cozy, impossible calm of the room. This is a tavern. Relax, Jiangju said with a small smile. Whatever danger was chasing you, once you step into this place, you're safe. Come in, sit, rest. He reached out and plucked the sword from the young man's hand, inspecting it briefly before returning it with a casual flourish. The swordsman, a little disarmed by the ease of the gesture, hesitated and then took a seat. Brother, is this the fairy realm? The little girl asked, peeking from behind the swordsman. Her eyes flicked to the television with a child's curiosity. No, Jingju replied. This world is much like yours, ordinary, not a fairyland, but fate sometimes brings ordinary people to a tavern. He turned to the girl and crouched slightly. You're too young for wine. Try this. With a wave, a small glass of juice materialized in his hand. The three adults stared at the juice and wine appearing as if conjured. The masked swordsman nodded once, allowing the little girl to take the drink with a shy grin. Jiangju went back to his bar and prepared drinks for the others. He didn't make anything new. He set 3 identical, transparent cups before the adults, the same colorless liquid Gu Yi had tasted. Is there a legend of Avalokitesvara in your world? He asked suddenly. In another world where Avalokitesvara exists, there is a thing called heart wine. It eases the heart, helps lay worries to rest. Heart wine? The slovenly man abandoned his wine gourd and, in a swaggering move, picked up the cup and downed it like water. For a heartbeat, his posture looked bold and untamed. Then he folded forward and crashed onto the table. Senior, Master Jujianshian, the masked swordsman shouted in alarm, stumbling to the man's side. The fallen man was clearly his mentor, and the younger man's calm cracked into terror. Don't worry, Jiangju said, lifting a hand to soothe. He's just drunk. Heart wine makes you intoxicated, regardless of how heavy your sorrow is. It's designed to loosen the weight on your chest, that's all. He glanced at the swordsman with a half-amused, half-sympathetic expression. The young man was still shaky, unsure whether to help his mentor or question the mysterious tavern. For now, they were safe inside the warm little room, with rules on the wall and a bartender who treated godly tears like a topping. Xiaohei munched another piece of bamboo, unfazed. Outside, the world might still be chaotic, but inside the tavern the rules held. 1 cup a day, no fighting, and leave the interpretation of everything to Jiangju. Chapter 3. Li Xiaoyao. Li Xiaoyao's life had once been simple and happy. Then one thing after another happened. A careless marriage, a trick that forced him to drink water that made him forget love, friends who died because of him, and the woman he loved the most, giving her life to save him, and another who loved her. After surviving all that, he somehow returned to the past, determined to rewrite the fate of himself and the 2 women he loved. But on his way to escape, his vision blurred, and he woke in a strange place where his future teacher had also collapsed after a single glass of wine. Li watched his teacher slump to the floor. He had forgotten how dangerous the owner of this tavern was. The proprietor, Jiangju, made a small hand sign, and the sword hanging behind Li clanged up into the air. Li reached for it instinctively, ready to strike, but then realized he couldn't move. He had been rooted to the spot. You're always so impatient, Jiangju scolded lightly. After everything you've been through, and you're still so quick to anger. He shook his head and added, Don't worry, Jujianshan is only drunk. Li stared. That's nonsense. If my master's the kind to be a wine swordsman, he's not going to be felled by a single cup. Check him for poison if you like. I'm just a tavern keeper. No reason to set him up. Jiangju waved a hand as if dismissing the argument. Li found himself able to move again, though he was calmer now. Earlier, he'd almost lost control. A middle-aged woman, Li's grandmother, peered anxiously at the fallen swordsman and asked, What kind of wine was that? This is heart wine, Jiangju answered. It tastes faintly astringent at first, but its aftertaste lingers. It calls up your happiest memories. At that moment, the swordsman, Zhu Jianxian, began to stir. He did not look half-drunk anymore. If anything, he seemed invigorated, as if the wine had cleared his head rather than clouded it. Xinju, what a fitting name, Zhu Jianxian said with a sigh. Too bad I shouldn't drink more. He blinked around, then bowed to Jiangju. Thank you, senior. Jiangju knew the heart wine had loosened some knot in Zhu Jianxian's heart. He smiled inwardly at the swordsman's temperament, then assumed his usual brusque air. Don't thank me yet. 3 cups are 60 taels. The tavern doesn't do credit. 60 taels for 3 cups. Zhu Jianxian, who'd never worried about money, froze. 3 cups cost 18 taels of gold? He blurted. Besides, we didn't even ask for 3. So you mean we were being cheated? Jiangju said calmly, as if announcing a fact. Zhu Jianxian felt as if the man before him were some sort of judge. Li Xiaoyao stepped forward and took 2 gold bars from his sleeves, laying them on the counter. That should cover it. Fine, that's enough. Jiangju immediately shifted, tossed the silver back to Zhu Jianxian with a hint of disgust, and returned 2 taels of gold to Li Xiaoyao. They didn't run tabs here, but he added, he wouldn't squeeze more money from guests either. With the small drama over, Li Xiaoyao took a cautious sip of heart wine. The middle-aged woman followed suit, and the 3 of them sank into a shared dream of sweet memories. When the vision faded, Li wiped his cheeks. His grandmother still sat there, eyes clouded in reminiscence. Zhu Jianxian examined their surroundings as if cataloging the place. Li stood and moved to the bar. Senior, he said, hesitating. From what you said earlier, it sounds like you know about us. Is this another world? Jiangju regarded him. I've heard things. What is it you want? He studied Li and thought, handsome, though not as much as himself. Then he grew serious. You should understand, if you change the past, the future will change with it, and once you step out of this tavern, you may cease to exist. Li swallowed. He had thought about one thing the whole time. If there's no Linger, Baowei won't resurrect the water monster. I'll find ways to handle anything else. I can prepare carefully before I send Linger here, so you won't have to worry about the water monsters. Jiangju's expression darkened. The water monster is only sealed, not eradicated. It's the duty of the descendants of the Nuwa clan to deal with it. If you truly alter the past, what becomes of the people in that world? At that moment, Gu Yi, who had been knocked out earlier, woke. Jiangju turned to her. Master Gu Yi, will you accept this child as your disciple? Gu Yi sighed. She'd roused shortly after Li and the others arrived, and had already discovered they were not from this place. Some even bore the marks of Linger. That Jiangju had unearthed all of this did not surprise her. He had a way of knowing things. She studied Li Xiaoyao a moment longer and then, with a mix of caution and resolve, nodded. If he truly has Linger's qualities, I will take her on as my disciple. Li felt a strange trust toward Jiangju, an odd sense that began the moment he'd handed over those 2 gold bars. He made himself not to overthink it. Jiangju, seeing the uncertainty, slid a small card across the counter. Take this, he said. If you decide, come back to the tavern and look for me. Li picked up the card and looked at it for a moment. All right, we'll wait until grandmother wakes. We'll be on our way in a few days and won't trouble you again for the time being. With that, they gathered their things and prepared to rest, each thinking over the impossible choices ahead, whether to change a past that might erase themselves, and whether the risk of rewriting history was worth saving the ones they loved. Chapter 4. Get the Ancient One. In the end, Li Xiaoyao left with a small group. Linger lingered by the door, reluctant to leave her things behind, especially the little cat that had been curled up on her lap, while the others showed little emotion and hurried away as if eager to be gone. Jiangju stepped forward, squatting down to where the cat clung stubbornly to Linger's sleeve. You frightened them, didn't you? He chided gently. The cat puffed up in indignation. What? How dare you? It wasn't me who scared them. It was that panda. You're not a panda, Jiangju cut in with a roll of his eyes. You're a red panda. Pandas usually means giant pandas. You don't look like a national treasure. Second-class protected species are still important, the red panda snorted, hopping off and stalking away from the tavern hall in a huff. Gu Yi smiled at the display. Looks like you two get along. After all, he's the only companion I brought from my old world, Jiangju said, motioning Guyi to sit. I wanted to talk with you about the child, Linger. She's Linger, yes? Guyi's long life as a mage gave her no trouble with names. I suspected you wanted to take on a disciple. Jiangju snapped his fingers and 2 steaming cups of coffee appeared in his hands. He set them on the table. Good coffee, he said simply. Guyi regarded the cup and then leaned forward. That girl's potential is enormous. I sense a powerful energy sealed inside her. If she can learn to control it, she might surpass me. She's descended from one of that world's creator deities, Jiangju explained. Her divine blood may be diluted, but don't underestimate it. No wonder. Guyi sipped the coffee, then asked, Will more like her come to your tavern? We're opening a place for travelers, brothers from all over. My tavern will welcome anyone, Jiangju replied with a smile. But don't worry, without my permission, or an invitation from a native of this world, no one who comes through can just walk out and enter the outside world. I promise that. Guyi inclined her head. She believed Jiangju. She trusted his strength, even if she didn't know its limits. Very well, so you expect me to continue running my shop here. Can you say no? Jiangju grinned. Guyi almost rolled her eyes, but held her composure. It's not like I wanted to. This tavern is connected to many spaces and times. Even I can't undo that quickly. Jiangju's expression softened. I don't want to leave this world either. There are interesting things here. Guyi found herself speechless. Faced with such a capable, stubbornly human man, even she, the supreme mage, had no leverage. After a brief silence, she allowed a small smile. It seemed inevitable that after Linger arrived, she would be trained thoroughly. Being the supreme mage of the wheel didn't sound like a bad prospect in a way. May I ask one more thing? Guyi glanced at the empty cup. The barista he had charmed earlier had reverted to her original form as soon as Jiangju put the cup down. Didn't you already? Jiangju asked, sipping his own coffee. Guyi steadied herself and asked, Why do you take only money? Why not accept other things? Jiangju popped a pastry into his mouth and answered between bites. First, I'm not the devil from your Western stories. Second, money is humanity's constant belief. It's a concentrated form of power, and that power helps sustain the tavern's daily energy needs. Guyi nodded. The answer was practical and disturbingly, somehow sensible coming from him. Thank you for answering, Mr. Jiangju. You're welcome. Do you want more coffee? He offered. No, thank you. It's getting late. I must go. Guyi could see he was eager to show his guests out, something she had rarely encountered in her long life of command and solitude. It felt strange, but there was no point resisting. She rose and left the tavern. After Guyi departed, Jiangju closed the space door and hung a closed sign on the tavern's handle. Humming under his breath, he conjured a broom and a rag and started sweeping. Xiaohei, your hair is everywhere. Get out here! He bellowed, and the red panda's indignant shrieks echoed through the place. The next morning, the sun had only just risen when Jiangju stepped out of the tavern in joggers and headphones. He pushed play on his phone and ran without a destination, simply wanting to clear his head. Eventually, he found himself in line at a breakfast cart with several other people. He took a bite of the hot dog he'd bought and grimaced. Pretty ordinary, he muttered, and, in frustration, tossed it aside, only to pick it up again and finish it with exaggerated determination. Hey, what's with the face? The vendor complained. Sorry, it's not fancy food. There are a lot of people in line, Jiangju said with his mouth full. Exactly, the vendor huffed. If you want something good, go to a Michelin restaurant. You don't get gourmet from a street cart. Jiangju considered the wisdom in that and, with an exaggerated nod, agreed. He bought a few everyday supplies at a nearby supermarket and headed back to the tavern, already thinking about the comforts of home. As expected, home is the best place, he thought as he saw Xiaohei padding around with a trail of loose fur behind him, except for that smelly cat. Chapter 5. Odin is here. After the excitement, both Jiangju and Xiaohei were exhausted. Jiangju stopped answering Xiaohei's taunts, snapped his fingers, and the tavern went from a mess to spotless in an instant. Tables that had been knocked crooked slid quietly back into place. I'm beat, you little terror. I should cast something to fix all that fur on you, Jiangju said, pulling a bottle of Coke out of thin air and taking a swig. You want me to die of heat? The red panda Xiaohei grumbled. Then clean the tavern yourself. Jiangju gave him a look. Do you know how tiring cleaning is? Xiaohei rolled his eyes and sank down on the purple mat in the sun. Ha ha, he said lazily and promptly fell asleep. Jiangju watched him, then turned his attention to the bar. He'd already put his favorite bottle on the shelf. No need to mix that one, but he still wanted to make something special for the day. How about I just mess around? Jiangju mused aloud. Are you saying that as the tavern owner? Xiaohei mumbled without opening his eyes. Exactly. If an owner's in this mood, I'll really go all out. Jiangju smiled and let his mind drift. He was still staring into the air when someone slammed the door open. A towering man in golden armor strode in, one eye visible beneath his helm, a spear in his hand. He exuded the kind of presence that made even the sunlight feel smaller. Welcome, Jiangju began, but before he could finish the word, the man raised his spear and sent a scorching bolt of light across the room. Jiangju rolled his eyes, waved a hand, and let the beam freeze in midair. Xiaohei continued to snore on the mat. Then, calm as if dealing with nothing more dangerous than a drunk, Jiangju walked up to the stunned stranger and pulled a crayon from his pocket. With an exaggerated flourish, he drew a large cartoon turtle on the man's face. The one-eyed man could feel the motion, but he was rooted to the spot, helpless to stop it. Jiangju finished his masterpiece, snapped a picture of the poor fellow with a peace sign, and struck a theatrical pose. Hey, don't get too excited. If you have a heart attack, I'm not paying for it. You attacked me first, remember? Jiangju said, inspecting his handiwork with satisfaction. I'm here to spy on you, came a voice from the doorway. Hey, Gu Yi had slipped in while Jiangju was busy. He grinned at the immobilized stranger. Boss Jiang seems to be in a good mood today. Were you spying? Jiangju asked without looking up. Want to make a drink with me, or are you here for some heart-to-heart wine? Gu Yi's smile faded as he took in the man in golden armor. I came to pick up my apprentice and to check on an uninvited guest, he said. He knew this newcomer. Jiangju shrugged. If you two know each other, go ahead and sort it out. I don't want to fight, I'm tired. I'll make you a drink, something that suits someone your age. He snapped his fingers and strolled behind the bar. The frozen light unwound. The spear slid harmlessly off to the umbrella stand. The one-eyed man struggled for a moment, then sat down across from Gu Yi, eyes still blazing with anger and humiliation. Gu Yi couldn't help laughing. I didn't expect the mighty All-Father of Asgard to look like this, he said, producing a hand mirror and holding it up. The one-eyed man, Odin of Asgard, took the mirror and gaped. Two crude turtles smiled back at him from his cheeks, and some blocky characters in an unfamiliar script had been scrawled across his forehead. On his brow, unmistakably silly, was a cartoon family portrait. 6 stick figures labeled as his family, 2 wives and 3 children. Who is he? Odin demanded. I don't know, Gu Yi said. He came after some commotion. Says he's from another world and wants to run a tavern here. That's about all I've got. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that he's powerful, more than I expected. Odin's expression turned serious. I don't know if his arrival is a blessing or a curse. 2 infinity stones are on Earth. Maybe he came for them. The tavern connects countless times and spaces, Gu Yi replied. Not just parallel worlds, completely different worlds. Someone like that doesn't necessarily need the infinity stones. That's not certain, Odin said, his voice sharp. He glanced at Jiangju across the room, who had just come back carrying a tray. In one hand, he held a shallow dish of pale green liquid that gleamed faintly. In the other, he balanced a small cube that pulsed with blue light. Is that the infinity stone you meant? Jiangju asked casually. Cosmic cube. Odin stood up so fast his chair scraped. If he hadn't been wary of causing more trouble, he might have attacked on the spot. Jiangju tilted his head. I found this on a one-eyed creature, much like you. He pinched the cube between thumb and forefinger. With the faintest pop, the cube split apart like a toy, collapsing into shards. A blue gem drifted up and hovered over Jiangju's palm, cold and resonant with a depth that made the room feel smaller. Odin stiffened. He had not expected that. My mother always told me that taking things without asking is stealing, Jiangju said lightly. If it belongs to someone else, it ought to be given back. He looked at the floating blue gem. Then with a tiny motion, the gem reassembled itself into the cube. The little cube blinked once, then vanished into nothing. Both Odin and a nearby figure, the Ancient One, who had been watching from the corner, stared at the empty air. If what they had seen wasn't an illusion, Jiangju had just displayed an ability to manipulate space, and perhaps more. The Ancient One's expression tightened. She had never suspected Jiangju could handle space like that, and today's demonstration had hinted at time as well. For Jiangju, it had been no more than a casual trick. He set the tray on the bar, poured 2 glasses, and slid them across to Guyi and Odin. "This is something I made just for you," he said with a small, confident smile. "It's called the Dew of Life. It restores lost life energy. Remember, restores, not grants. And that kind of help comes at a sincere price, 100 gold coins." Odin had only just come to terms with the idea that the young figure before him might actually be stronger than he was, when the man's attitude flipped into that of a shrewd shopkeeper. It was enough to puncture the heroic image Odin had been nursing. Then the wine in front of him drew his attention. Jiangju had called the drink the Dew of Life. Even before the explanation was finished, the faint glow and delicate scent from the glass made Odin relax noticeably. The effect was convincing. Jiangju hadn't been lying. 100 gold coins for this? Odin muttered. For a king, 100 gold coins was a bargain. You're the only one who can say that, Guyi replied with a small twitch at the corner of her mouth. 100 gold coins wasn't a problem for her either, but Jiangju wouldn't accept ancient coins that were no longer in circulation, and in the magical world, those coins weren't easy to come by. Still, Guyi produced 100 gold coins and handed them over. The promise of restoring vitality without side effects was a temptation she couldn't refuse. She'd been leeching energy from the dark plane to keep herself alive. Anything that could free her from that dependence was worth paying for. They lifted their glasses and drank. Even though it was called the Dew of Life, it was still wine, and the casual way Jiangju watched them drink made her shake her head. She'd never mixed drinks for these two again. At first, the difference was subtle. Then both Odin and Guyi gave a little shudder. A dark green light flushed their skin, and a thin veil of black mist drifted up from their heads. They both relaxed into contented expressions, and each felt noticeably younger, as if years melted away. "Boss Zhang, this is incredible," Guyi said, smiling. "I have absolute confidence in my bartending," Jiangju replied, sounding pleased with himself. "Only thing is, this batch is a little small." Odin belched. A noxious, turbid air escaped him, and Guyi instinctively took a step back and frowned. "If you want more, buy it, tomorrow or whenever," Jiangju said, shrugging. "Money buys quantity. Don't worry, I can make as much as you can pay for." Guyi glanced at the bottles on the shelf labeled Shin wine. "Is there a difference between the Dew of Life you made and the bottles on the shelf?" "If I didn't personally distill it, the special brews only reach 30 to 40% of their potency," Jiangju said, grinning as if he'd just made a clever joke. "Price stays the same, though." Guyi bristled inwardly. Jiangju's smugness undermined his earlier competence. Odin looked disappointed. "So we can't have the Dew of Life again today?" "You can, if you want to mix it with other wines. But for now, I'd recommend the Shin wine. Let's see who it affects," Jiangju said, his voice bright with mischief. "Shin wine?" Odin asked. He reached for a bottle, poured a glass, and sniffed it. It had almost no fragrance, more like water than wine. "You'll know it when you drink it," Jiangju said, waving a hand. "Speaking of, I have a guest." The tavern door creaked open, and Li Xiaoyao stepped out, followed by Linger and the old woman everyone called Grandma. Zhu Jianshan was not with them. Linger and Grandma looked as if they'd been carrying a small bundle between them. Jiangju's eyes softened when he saw Li. It was clear that Li had come to a decision. "Long time no see, boss," Li said with a small, tired smile. "For me, it was just yesterday," Jiangju replied with a careless shrug and let them settle. Li, Grandma, and Linger greeted Odin and Guyi. Odin, having already drunk the Sin wine, had fallen into a drowsy sleep and didn't stir. "So, you've made up your mind?" Jiangju asked, slipping easily into conversation beside Linger and teasing the shy child. "Would you like a drink?" Today's selection might be a bit strong. I'll just have that juice from before and some pastries, Li said. He didn't know the customs here and kept his request simple. All right, take your time. Jiangju waved his hand and 3 glasses of juice and a plate of cakes appeared on the table. Linger's face lit up and she dug in happily. Li told them what had happened since he left. He'd spent the time thinking over Jiangju's warning, that if Linger stayed in this world, she might eventually fade from it. Li trusted someone strong. If Jiangju said that, it must be true. He had even tried to change fate. He'd flown west intentionally to alter events, but fate had a way of looping back. In the end, he found himself back on the fairy island where everything began. It had shown him one clear truth. He couldn't save Linger by taking her with him. So you decided to let Linger remain here? Jiangju asked quietly. Yes, Li said, voice low. I want her to be free of that fate. If she's to have a future, it's better she never meets me again. Are you sure? Are you really prepared to give her up? Jiangju asked with a seriousness that made the room feel smaller. Li smiled sadly. There's a saying that sometimes love is best shown in release. Letting go can be a kind of love. He ruffled cake crumbs from the corner of Linger's mouth and looked at her with a tenderness that made his words hang in the air. Very well. Then let Linger become the Ancient One's disciple, Jiangju declared. Grandma had been listening, her features unreadable. She couldn't grasp all the words, but she'd sensed that Li was different, perhaps even from another time, and in her heart she believed some higher power was guiding them. She offered no objection. If both of them are to stay, Jiangju added, there will be a price. Li met that with a calm smile. He'd been ready for it. Gu Yi, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and asked, what are the formalities for accepting a disciple? As long as the girl agrees, the form doesn't matter much, Jiangju said, then looked toward Linger. Linger, would you be willing to be my apprentice? Linger's eyes went wide. Can Grandma come with me? She asked immediately. Of course, Jiangju said. You won't be left alone. And Brother Xiaoyao? Linger turned to Li. Be a good girl, Li said, producing a small brown seed. When this seed takes root and grows, I'll come back to find you. He pressed the stone into Linger's hand, the promise in his voice a steady thing. They clasped hands, big and small together, and Linger smiled. She then bowed demurely to Gu Yi and with a bright, innocent voice called her Master. Jiangju stepped forward then. He placed his right hand to his forehead, drew out a thread of light and shaped it into a sheet of paper. On the back were neat characters. On the front was drawn a flying sword. I copied one of your skills, he said to Li, offering the card. Take this as my reward. Li accepted it with a nod. Then it's decided. Linger, be well, he said softly. I won't let you or Linger be sorrowful, Jiangju told Li confidently. Linger looked up at Li once more. He smiled at her with an affection so deep it was almost painful, then took a step toward the tavern door. As he did, his figure shimmered, the world reflected gold, and in an instant he had become a shaft of light that streaked away, leaving a silence filled with the promise of return. Chapter 7. The Lost One. Zhao Linger had chosen to stay in this world and rewrite her fate. Now, with Li Xiaoyao gone, she seemed to sense something amiss. She stood before the heavy wooden door and looked at Jiangju with a puzzled expression. Has Brother Xiaoyao left? She asked in a small voice. Jiangju crouched until he was level with her and answered softly, Yes, your brother Xiaoyao is a great hero, Linger. There are many people out there who need him. Zhao Linger's face fell for a moment, then she nodded and smiled through her disappointment. I forgive him then, but will he come back? Of course he will, Jiangju said, offering her a comforting lie. Didn't he give you a seed? If he doesn't come back right away, when you grow up and master your teacher's skills, you can go find him yourself. When the time comes, you just need to step through that door. He reached out and patted her head. Zhao Linger let out a bright laugh. Really, Master? Of course, he replied, but only if you work hard and learn everything I teach you. I will, she promised, nodding fiercely. Jiangju smiled. Giving her a goal would keep her focused. He also noticed how their clothes looked, ancient-style garments more suited to the eastern lands of this world, so she and her grandmother would have some adjusting to do before any talk of modern schooling. At that moment, Odin, who had been dozing in a corner, woke up and blinked his eyes open. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, still a little affected by the wine he'd drunk, and peered at the small crowd. "Hmm, Ancient One, who is this child?" he asked, bewildered. "This is my new apprentice, the future Supreme Mage," Jingju replied with a little pride. He couldn't help but be pleased. The child's talent was obvious. Zhao Linger giggled at Odin's odd tone and shrank instinctively behind Jiangju. Odin, flustered, glanced down at his forehead. "Boss, can you wash that off my brow?" he asked, looking helpless. Jiangju shook his head. "No, that marks your punishment for attacking me." Odin sputtered. He explained, half to himself, that he'd been resting in Asgard when he heard the sound of firecrackers and inexplicably got the location of this tavern. Heimdall had apparently detected nothing in the 9 realms, so Odin came to Earth himself. When he stepped into the tavern, he'd perceived a terrifying aura and reacted by striking out. He thought he'd attacked a little fat cat lounging on one of the chairs, but events hadn't unfolded as he expected. For now, though, he just wanted the mark on his brow gone. If he returned to Asgard with that on his face, he'd be the laughingstock of the 9 realms. Jiangju considered him for a second. 9 days, he said finally. "It'll take 9 days to fade. Don't try to cover it with magic, or it'll never come off." 9 days? Odin groaned. "Can I stay here until it's gone?" "This is a tavern, not an inn," Jiangju replied bluntly. "You can't stay." Guyi, no, Jiangju's expression softened into an offer. "If you need a place to rest, come by Kamertage for a few days." Relieved, Odin accepted. He couldn't argue with the proprietor. After all, it was his own carelessness that had landed him in this mess. After Jiangju saw Odin and the others off, he returned to his seat and to his book. The tavern was quiet. It wasn't famous yet, so very little attention from the people of this world, or those who slipped through time and space, was focused on it. Mornings were sporadic with arrivals like Odin or other odd travelers. Afternoons, for the most part, passed calmly, with only a few office workers drifting in. Around 4 in the afternoon, as Jiangju was yawning and about to close up and go out for a bite, he felt a ripple in the air, a strange fluctuation of energy. Something red and fast tore through a small, unstable space-time tier and tumbled into the room. "An uninvited guest," Jiangju muttered, snapping his fingers. A man in a scarlet suit trimmed with golden lightning jolted into existence and immediately passed out. Jiangju scratched the back of his head. He had pushed the arrival through gently to avoid damaging the tavern or its patrons, but the fellow fainting outright was embarrassingly anticlimactic. The black cat, Xiao He, padded over, sniffed at the man, and used his tiny paws to check for breath. "Still breathing," he announced with a snort. "You think I don't know that?" Jiangju grumbled, but he lifted the man effortlessly and settled him into a chair. Then, on impulse, he poured a glass of wine and tipped it to the stranger's lips. The man drank greedily, and color rushed back into his cheeks. He blinked and looked around, confusion written all over his face. "Where am I?" "You're in my tavern," Jiangju said. "Relax. Drink this." The man drank the rest of the cup and sat up straighter. He blinked at the room, taking in the mismatched faces and the lounging cat, then offered a sheepish smile. "Thanks. My name's Barry Allen. People call me the Flash. Nice to meet you." Jiangju eyed him with mild curiosity. Barry glanced down at his suit, then at Jiangju, and added, "I don't remember passing out. One moment I was running, then I was here. Did you bring me in after I collapsed?" "No," Jiangju replied. "You sort of erupted through a wormhole and lost consciousness. I moved you so nobody got hurt." Barry ran a hand through his whorled hair and let out a long breath. "Right, great. Well, thanks for the rescue." He managed a small, grateful grin that suggested he'd seen stranger things before and would again. Chapter 8, The Lost Man, Part 2. You're welcome. It might be my fault you passed out." Jiangju scratched the back of his head, trying to sound casual. The Flash stared at him, baffled. "Are you some kind of shapeshifter?" "Of course not," Jiangju said, slightly amused. "You still don't remember what you did? The things I did?" The Flash frowned, thinking. Then his expression snapped tight as memory returned. He'd been sprinting along the coast, trying to dissipate a tsunami that threatened Zhongcheng City. He'd felt the speed force surge through him, then everything had gone black and he'd woken up here. He scrambled to his feet and tried to run. His legs refused to obey. Calm down, Barry Allen. You can be so impulsive. Jiangju shook his head. He studied the young man who looked exactly like his childhood hero, with a mix of affection and exasperation. The Flash, Barry Allen, glared at him. Who are you? As you can see, Jiangju said, gesturing at the building, I'm the owner of this tavern. He intended to reassure him, but Barry only grew more agitated. I don't know why you're detaining me, but you have to let me go. The tsunami. People need me. Barry's voice carried that desperate, pleading edge of someone convinced they were still on a mission. Jiangju cut him off gently. I'm a CSI, he said, and I tend to trust what my eyes tell me. Just to be safe, I'm going to seal your power for a little while. Without waiting for a response, Jiangju closed his hand in a small, precise gesture. A soft band of light wrapped Barry's wrists, and the Flash felt the speed force dissipate from his limbs like mist in sunlight. Panic flickered across his face, but the movement he'd been trying to make was possible again, slowly at normal human speed. Are you sure he'll be okay in there? A small voice, Xiaohei, asked from behind the bar. Jiangju waved off the concern and reached into empty air. He pulled out a set of loose clothes and handed them to Barry. By the way, I don't have a flash suit on hand, he said wryly. I don't have your biometric data, so this will have to do. Barry changed into the ordinary clothes and stepped out with Jiangju. The two of them wandered the streets of Manhattan, or, as locals like to call the comic fans in Jiangju's world, Metropolis. Barry squinted at the towering skyline and the stream of taxis. Is this Metropolis? Some people use that name, Jiangju said with a smile. Most people call it New York. This is Manhattan. He stopped at a newsstand and bought Barry a map of the city and a stack of newspapers. The headlines and the unfamiliar names, the different dates and small cultural markers, they all told Barry what his guts already suspected. He wasn't in his own world anymore. The speed force had been severed. The physics he'd trusted no longer behaved the same. You believe me now? Jiangju asked. I can't imagine you would stage something elaborate enough to convince me, Barry said, still tense but calmer. So, you mean this really happened? Okay, no more jokes. Jiangju's voice became more serious. What are you going to do now? Go back, Barry said without hesitation. I have to get home. Iris, the team, they're counting on me to stop the tsunami. Who's Iris? Jiangju asked. He'd been a fan of American TV when he was younger. He'd loved The Flash once, though his enthusiasm had cooled over time, but the name still rang a bell. She's my fiancée, Barry said, and then, seeing Jiangju's puzzled look, added, I'm from Central City. I was trying to stop that wave when everything went black. How did you figure out my name? How do you know who I am? Jiangju asked. Barry blinked. You told me. Jiangju shrugged. Well, I could tell you I'm a god, but he smirked, then shook his head. Just kidding, not a god. Mostly a bar owner who accidentally opened a very weirdly connected tavern. Barry didn't press the point. He was busy piecing together what had happened. I was running to stop the tsunami, then I fainted. That's all I can remember, he said. They noticed the attention they drew. A few people on the sidewalk were staring. A couple of bold young men were actually walking over, phones out as if to ask for selfies or numbers. Barry wasn't in the mood for fanfare. The two of them ducked back inside the tavern, slipping through the door as though escaping a curious crowd. Once inside, they took stools at the bar and ordered burgers. As they ate, Jiangju explained his theory. This might really be my fault, he admitted, picking at his fries. The tavern only recently reopened. To let the infinite space know we're here, I put out a kind of beacon. It's part ritual, part technical. Maybe when you were running with all that desperate energy, the beacon resonated with it. The barrier between worlds is usually strong, but if the right kind of energy hits it, it can break. And you were right there. Infinite time and space? Barry repeated. Do you mean alternate universes? Not exactly, Jiangju said, trying to choose his words carefully. Parallel universes are different versions of the same universe, different outcomes of the same basic reality. Infinite time and space is bigger. It's composed of entirely separate worlds. One could be the universe of Star Wars, another could be the world of Harry Potter. Each is its own thing. My tavern sits at a crossroads and sometimes links to those worlds. Barry's eyes lit up with curiosity despite himself. You mean there could be a world where the stories we watch are real? Yes, Jiangju said with a half smile. Every imagined world lives somewhere in the infinite. If you get lucky or unlucky, you might even meet characters from those stories or find yourself pulled into a plot that hasn't yet played out. We can sometimes change things. We can rewrite endings. Barry swallowed. A rush of thought ran through him. If the tavern could reach other worlds, then maybe there was a way home. Maybe his arrival here wasn't only an accident, but an opportunity. Jiangju watched him and, quietly, added, Your arrival surprised me, but maybe it's a surprise that can change some tragedies. Barry looked at the map and the newspapers, then at the man across from him who had, by chance or by design, brought a superhero to a crossroads of realities. He wasn't ready to give up on his mission. He didn't know how he would get back, but if this place really could connect worlds, then there was hope. For now, though, they ate their burgers in the dim light, two strangers from different worlds trying to figure out what came next. Chapter 9. Temporary Settlement. After discovering the tavern's ability to connect to countless worlds, Barry wanted nothing more than to go back. His adoptive father had been captured by the metahumans in his world, and Central City had almost been wiped out by a tsunami. He couldn't sit idly by. Since the tavern can reach so many worlds, Jiangju, can you help me return? Barry asked, a flicker of hope in his voice. Jiangju shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't want to disappoint you, but I can't send you back at will. I'm powerful, but not that powerful. If this were a parallel version of your world, it might be simple. The problem is you crossed into another universe. Barry frowned. What do you mean? You came here by breaking the rules, Jiangju explained. Unless someone from your universe can come to the tavern through the normal channels and is fast enough to cross the universe barrier, you're stuck here for the time being. That can't be, Barry protested. If I hadn't gone back, Central City would have been destroyed. You can relax about that, Jiangju said. When you were running along the coast, you actually broke the time limit and returned to 1 day earlier. That's why you ended up here. You mean I traveled through time? Barry asked, incredulous. Yes. Jiangju reached out and extracted a sliver of golden energy from Barry's body. You have remnants of temporal energy inside you. Let me see if there are any clues. He rolled the ray into a small ball and gently blew. The golden energy unfolded into a translucent screen. Inside it was a replay of Barry, his pre-traveling self, running. As Jiangju had said, Barry had traveled through time. After overtaking his former self and beginning to slow, a space-time wormhole opened beneath him, and he was pulled in before he could react. This matches what I thought, Barry murmured. Yesterday I saw a strange shadow and figured I'd been hallucinating from fatigue. The speed force in you is unusual, Jiangju said, studying him. It's one of the most powerful energies in these universes. If you could fully control it, you could travel back in time and change things. Change the past? Really? Barry's voice went up with hope. You could, Jiangju said, but altering the past comes with a heavy price. He looked away for a moment, thoughtful. Barry's attention, however, had already shifted. If he couldn't go home right now, he needed to figure out how to survive in this world, and fast. Since he'd gained his powers, Barry required an enormous amount of energy. In Mid-City, he'd had S-Star Labs, Cisco, Dr. Harrison Wells, and the rest of Team Flash to help with logistics and reimbursements. In this world, he had no resources, no identity, and no way to be a cop. What are you thinking about? Jiangju asked. I don't have an identity here, Barry said, shrugging. I have to live somehow until I find a way back. Don't worry, your team will be looking for you. For now, you just need a place to stay. There's another problem, Barry said. You can't imagine how much energy I use in a day. I need to find work to support myself, but there are no records for me here. I can't be a police officer. Jiangju tried not to laugh. Maybe you could work as a courier or a food delivery person, he smirked. Your speed would make you perfect for it. Barry brightened. That actually makes sense. No identity needed. I get to run a lot. 2 birds with 1 stone. You're serious? Jiangju sounded surprised. I am. Barry's determination was obvious, and I need somewhere to stay. You can live here at the tavern, Jiangju said. I have a few empty rooms on the 2nd floor. No free room and board? Barry asked, slightly embarrassed. I appreciate the offer, but I can't just freeload. It's fine, Jiangju replied dismissively. I have too much time on my hands to turn away guests. Barry shook his head. I insist. If you won't take anything, then I'll find another place, though I doubt I'll be able to avoid you. You're stubborn, Jiangju said with a roll of his eyes. All right, be reasonable. $20 a night is the market price. This place isn't some cheap motel, Barry protested lightly, grateful but still intent on paying. Let me see how the market is tomorrow, and I'll pay accordingly. Find work first, then we'll talk about money, Jiangju said, no longer arguing. He could tell Barry was still on edge. Do you have a computer I can use? I want to check on some things, Barry asked. Of course. Come on up to your room. Everything's there. Jiangju led him through the tavern's wooden door behind the bar and up the stairs to the second floor. For now, Barry had no choice but to stay. When, or if, someone from the Arrowverse could come through to this tavern was something even Jiangju couldn't predict. The tavern's connections to other times and worlds were random by design. Not even its proprietor could force them. That randomness gave the tavern meaning. If he could control who came and went at will, it would no longer be an improbable crossroads of fate, and whatever magic it had would vanish. Only when life is full of accidents and random events do I feel truly alive, Jiangju said to himself as they walked up the stairs. Chapter 10. Lightning Express. Emily was a gaming streamer with over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. She loved gaming so much that she often forgot to eat when she was busy. She wasn't great at cooking, and she never seemed to have the time or patience to learn, so ordering takeout had become her default. She tended to stick to familiar places, reliable, affordable, and nearby. If something was too far, delivery either wasn't available or the fee was outrageous. To Emily, eating was about survival, not indulgence. If she had extra money to spare, she liked to joke. She might as well spend it on Krypton gold. Today had been irritating. She'd been harassed in a match and shut the game off in a foul mood. She lay on her bed for a long while, debating where to get lunch. The sun outside was blistering hot. The very idea of stepping outdoors made her groan. After 10 minutes of indecision, she surrendered to the easiest option, takeout, but wanted to try something different. She scrolled through delivery apps until she settled on a Mexican place, then paused on the rider's page. The delivery service was called Lightning Express and used a gaudy logo, tacky, she thought, but the delivery fee was reasonable. A handsome photo of the rider made her smile, and almost without thinking, she tapped to order. I'll give it 20 minutes, she told herself, imagining the food being prepared. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Emily frowned. Who could it be? She shuffled to the door and peered through the peephole. Outside stood a man in a full superhero costume, red suit, lightning emblem, and a lunchbox in hand. Who are you? I'm not buying insurance, Emily grumbled, opening the door a crack. Quick delivery, your takeout has arrived, a cheerful voice called. Takeout? She was bewildered. She'd only ordered moments ago. There was no way. The rider smiled and pushed the thermos box toward her. He moved with an unusual electricity in his step, as if he might bolt at any second. How did you get here so fast? Emily asked, simultaneously taking the food and raising her phone to snap a picture. Accident, the rider shrugged, not giving anything away. He waited for payment, eyes bright with an odd kind of earnestness. Wow, you should be a superhero for real, Emily mused, half a fan's awe, half a streamer's instinct. Why not make that your job? Superhero's my side gig, he replied with a grin. This is the main one. Then, once she paid, he was gone, vanished before she could finish the sentence. Emily couldn't resist. She posted the video immediately. Superhero delivers my lunch in 5 minutes? It was too good not to share. Across town, in a small tavern with a wall of windows, Jiangju sat staring at Barry's delivery page on his phone. Xiaohei lounged nearby, half watching a TV series and half absorbed in the phone that had Xiaohei's other ear. Barry, whose profile on the delivery site claimed outrageously fast service under the name Lightning Express, had been set up after a suggestion from Jiangju. The plan was simple. Sign up as a free rider to build up reputation, then open a personal page and accept orders officially. Today was Barry's 5th run. You're making things harder for him? Jiangju asked, not looking up from the phone. It's not like you don't know his speed, Xiaohei said casually. If Superman can do everything, why can't the Flash do it? Jiangju scrolled through comments on Barry's page. Most were positive, but some viewers were calling him a fraud, saying it was staged, that no one could arrive that fast. Views aren't great yet, he said. Some people are calling him a liar. Everything's slow at the start. Be patient, Xiaohei replied. When I saw Li Xiaoyao, I wasn't cheering either. You would cheer if Lao Hu showed up, Jiangju said with a shrug. I like Grant's portrayal in The Flash, but in Li Xiaoyao, I prefer Lao Hu. It's a shame he can't be here. Xiaohei rolled his eyes. Fine, you're the elder. Final word. They both turned as the TV caught their attention. Footage from a breaking news report. A massive fire had trapped a dozen people inside a building, and firefighters were struggling to reach them. Then, in the blaze, a figure in red tights and a golden lightning emblem had darted in and pulled everyone out. Clips of the rescue flashed on the screen, followed by another video, grainy but unmistakable, of a costumed rider delivering takeout with lightning-quick speed. It should cause a sensation, Jiangju said, smiling. Yeah. Xiaohei's face darkened. It's already attracted Braised Egg's attention. If Braised Egg starts poking around Barry, it won't be long before they trace it back to the tavern. Jiangju sighed. Braised Egg's not all bad, really. He does what he thinks is right. It's just, his team was compromised by Hydra from the start. The name hung in the air like a warning. For now, they watched the clips again, wondering how much trouble Barry's little stunt would stir, and how long it would be before the world's fastest delivery would outrun the trouble it brought with it. Chapter 11. Orochimaru Washington Trident Building, S-Shield's surface headquarters. From the outside, it looked like any other office tower, and most people had no idea what went on inside. In a conference room lit by a bank of screens, the director of S.H. Shield, the one-eyed man who'd once blamed a cat for his missing eye, watched footage about the Flash. Short, grainy clips a delivery driver had recorded and uploaded to the Lightning Express site. Netizens like Emily had been sharing them non-stop. These uploads are authentic, reported a woman in a S.H.I.E.L.D. uniform. They're not composites. Nick Fury smirked. So a superhero went into hiding as a food delivery guy. He tapped a finger on the table. I want everything on him, now. He's just too fast, sir. The agent looked frustrated. Besides the videos and a few photos people posted, we don't have much. He's extremely cautious. We can't get reliable information about where he comes from or where he goes. Have you ever tried ordering from him? Fury asked. We did, she said. It's nearly impossible. He's too popular right now. The site's security is so tight, machine orders are blocked, and manual orders can't get through. We can't crack it. Then tail him, Fury said flatly. Whatever it takes. Find his name and where he lives. Yes, sir. She saluted and left. Across the city, other organizations had similar ideas, but none of them could pin the delivery man down. The Flash's order page seemed designed to repel prying eyes. Automated systems were shut out, and human orders were lost in the crowd. The result was pure irritation for everyone trying to track him. Far from government screens and surveillance, in a small tavern whose door opened onto a narrow lane, Gu Yi sat alone at the bar. Little Linger and her grandmother were not there. They'd stayed at Kamartaj. Linger was training under Kamartaj's tutelage, and her grandmother was handling the child's daily needs. The place had grown quieter since Jiangju, owner of the tavern and a supreme mage, had returned from recent errands. You've got another one of your masterpieces showing up, Gu Yi said with a wry smile when Jiangju mentioned Barry. It was an accident, Jiangju explained, recounting what had happened with Barry. I think he'll stay here for a while. The world's going to get more interesting, Gu Yi sighed. Wouldn't that be better? Jiangju smiled. Same old days grow dull. Gu Yi said nothing more. She savored the warm bloom that the dew of life always brought, an expensive glass but well worth the price to her. Jiangju, as owner and keeper of the place, took pleasure in such indulgences for friends. The little wooden door opened and a pale man stepped out. He wore black trousers, a black turtleneck, and a faded green vest. Long dark hair framed his face. He offered a polite nod and a smile when he saw Jiangju. Long time, Boss Jiang. Any special drinks tonight? he asked, settling at a table near the bar. When he glanced at Gu Yi, he bowed his head in a small greeting. Orochimaru again? Jiangju stood and went to the bar. With practiced hands, he mixed a drink, red and blue threads of liquor swirling in a glass, and slid it to the man. What's this? Orochimaru asked, curiosity plain on his face. A honey wine, Jiangju said. Not overly sweet. I think you'll like it. Try it and you'll see. He didn't go into detail. He rarely needed to. Orochimaru had begun coming a few days ago. Out of caution, perhaps, he hadn't made any scene, no yelling, no immediate show of power. He'd accepted the tavern with quiet wariness. Jiangju had a feel for people and could tell Orochimaru was startled by the wine's effect, even if he didn't show it. From his clothes and bearing, Jiangju guessed his origins, a survivor of the Second Ninja War, one of the so-called Sannin. The title seemed to weigh on him like a brand rather than a badge of honor. My chakras increased, Orochimaru murmured after a sip. Though he'd tried Jiangju's concoctions before, the change took him aback. 365,000 taels, Jiangju said evenly. I'll give you a discount, 360,000. Orochimaru produced 36 banknotes from the folds of his sleeve, placed them on the counter, and closed his eyes to feel the shift in his body. His chakra surged, 5 to 6 times stronger. For someone not born to a great clan, that kind of increase was rare and prized. Orochimaru had skill and technique, but some things, raw chakra, couldn't be acquired through practice alone. Even a lifetime of effort wouldn't make up for the Uzumaki-level reserves he lacked. Thank you, Boss Jiang, Orochimaru said, standing and performing a formal bow. Jiangju waved him off. Don't be polite about it. I like being paid, Jiangju said with a grin, shaking the banknotes. You can only drink this particular wine 3 times in your life. For you, that's the price of a few missions. Orochimaru inclined his head, felt the gratitude deepen into something he kept private, and then ordered a bottle of soda. From the tavern's bookshelf, he took down a slim volume titled Modern History of the Marvel Universe and returned to his table to read in silence. He'd learned quickly that Jiangju's place offered more than exotic drinks. It was a crossroads of knowledge, a library pulled together from many worlds, and a meeting place for ideas. A very bright man, the Ancient One observed from across the room. Gu Yi, who had already perused many of Jiangju's books when she first arrived, watched Orochimaru with interest. The shelves held everything from hard science to arcane lore and the occasional oddity, precious treasures in themselves. If he'd been born in the right era, Jiangju said softly, he could have been a scientist on par with Tony Stark. For a common-born person to reach even the level he did, well, even with a Hokage as his master, that's rare. The Hokage gave him a chance, but the path was his alone. Orochimaru sat quietly at a corner table, the book open in his lap. He had come to the tavern to learn about this world, so he resisted the urge to grab the most tantalizing tomes and instead chose a history volume. Knowledge, he decided, would be steadier than curiosity. Across the room, Jiangju stretched out beneath a sunbeam, flipping through a comic. No customers at the moment meant he could loaf. The warm light made him drowsy. No wonder Xiaohei loved to bask all day, he thought, letting out a contented sigh. The tavern door swung open and Barry entered, looking every bit as exhausted as he felt. He spotted Orochimaru, gave a quick wave, then went straight to the bar. He grabbed a glass, downed it in a few loud gulps, and sank into a chair. I'm alive at last, he said, rubbing his hands together and eyeing the sleeping Jiangju. What's wrong with the boss? Barry asked Orochimaru. Boredom, most likely, Orochimaru answered, glancing at the sunlit youth. The sight stirred a vague memory of an old friend. Perhaps he'd bring them along next time. Barry and Orochimaru were used to each other. Barry lived in the tavern, and Orochimaru came almost every day to read and drink. Barry had formed his own impressions, quiet, reserved, and frighteningly knowledgeable about biology. Some things Orochimaru muttered had made Barry crack a grin and murmur, Damn! Jiangju stirred, yawning, and half awoke when he heard Barry. Oh, you're back, he mumbled. Nearly 10,000 orders completed, Barry said, flicking the menu on the bar. With a few taps, plates of rich, high-calorie food appeared in front of him. Most of them wanted to see me in person. Jiangju frowned, but shuffled over and accepted a dish. 10,000 deliveries in a day was still a restrained estimate for him. The Flash's speed made express delivery absurdly profitable. Between $5 and $50 a job, plus tips from grateful customers, Barry's daily take was nearing 100,000 yuan. Barry leaned back, then mentioned, "Some big agency messaged me. The name was long, something like a government institution. They said they wanted to talk. They signed it with initials, SHIELD. SHIELD, Jiangju repeated. It's a global intelligence and enforcement organization. Barry shrugged. I don't much like those kinds of groups. You don't have to worry too much if you're careful, Jiangju said. With a little help, they can't get everything on you. And you should learn to make full use of your speed, not just running. Use it for perception, movement, thought. Your speed affects everything. He lacks the heart of a warrior, Orochimaru observed softly. He had been listening. Warrior? I'm just a cop. I don't even have a badge with a gun, Barry replied, sounding a little deflated. If you really applied your speed in combat, you'd be a killing machine, Orochimaru said almost to himself, the edge in his voice sharp. Please, Jiangju protested. I'm telling him not to just run away from danger, but to use his speed to assess and protect. Don't turn him into something he's not. He looked at Orochimaru. He's a policeman. You're a ninja. They're different. Orochimaru's expression didn't change. If they are an enemy, the cleanest way is to eliminate them. No, Barry said quietly. That's not our way. Killing would be illegal. As the Flash, I'm a vigilante, not a judge. I can't take someone's life. What about people who kill others? Don't they deserve to pay? Orochimaru asked, unflinching. That's the court's job, Barry answered firmly. Police gather evidence, judges pass sentences. The system has flaws, yes, but it protects ordinary people. We have to work within it. They fell into a brief silence, each standing by his principles. Fine, Orochimaru said at last. Keep your law, I'll keep my war. Jiangju clapped the table and barked, You're both stubborn. Then he turned to Barry, more serious. Be careful, this world isn't peaceful. Plenty of people scheme in the shadows. Your power will attract attention. I'll watch my back, Barry said, though Jiangju suspected he didn't fully feel the danger. He hoped Xiaohei's particular protections would hold. The idea of stepping in himself felt wrong, an adult interfering in a child's fight. Jiangju hated imposing his will on others, so he forced himself to step back. Orochimaru closed his book and rose. It's getting late, I should go. You can come and go here anytime, Barry said, puzzled. Why are you leaving now? We're still at war, Orochimaru replied simply. I return to the front tomorrow. Chapter 13. Jiangju is very happy. Jiangju is going to cook. When Orochimaru announced he was going to take part in the war, Barry was visibly taken aback. He knew Orochimaru came from another world, but he had never imagined that world was in the middle of a war. Mr. Orochimaru, please be careful, Barry managed to say. There wasn't much else he could offer. War is inevitable for humanity, Jiangju said lightly. As long as people have desires, war will never completely stop. Can't you, boss, stop the war? Is there a world without war? Barry asked. He was a policeman from a peaceful reality. The crises they faced here were mostly caused by people transformed by technology, so it still felt like there was hope for order and reason. There are many planets and worlds without war or death, Jiangju replied casually. Then, seeing Orochimaru's hopeful look and Barry's brightening face, he added, as if dousing them with cold water, but there are no living things on those worlds. Orochimaru let out a short, almost self-mocking chuckle, amusing himself for a ninja who had briefly wished for a world without conflict. Barry went silent and thoughtful. Jiangju took a sip from an invisible glass of juice that appeared in his hand. War and peace are cycles, he went on. There's no endless peace, and there's no endless war. Humans are born with a predatory instinct. It's only through morality and training that we become civilized. But that morality is acquired, and at some point, it can't completely overcome that innate urge to seize and plunder. That's why crimes and even wars keep appearing. What an ingenious explanation, Orochimaru said with a small smile. I hope I can hear more of Boss Jiang's thoughts next time. With your power, that shouldn't be a problem, Jiangju shrugged. And besides, your chakra has grown. Come have a drink with us next time you're free. Orochimaru smiled and took his leave. Just as he reached the doorway to return to his own world, Xiaohei suddenly stopped him. "Hey, could you give this to Princess Tsunade's brother for me?" the little panda asked, producing a seed and holding it out. "Leave it with the rope tree?" Orochimaru puzzled. It wasn't that he thought the panda could actually speak, it was that he couldn't figure out how this small creature, so much like Jiangju's pet, knew about the rope tree. "Is that a problem?" Xiaohei asked calmly. "No, no problem. I'll deliver it personally," Orochimaru stammered, clearly unsettled. Even without understanding how the seed and the rope tree connected, he'd felt a chill from Xiaohei's aura and was oddly intimidated. A lecherous pet, it seemed, could be intimidating too. "You always seem like you're thinking something naughty." Xiaohei narrowed his eyes. "No, not at all. Don't be ridiculous. Goodbye." Orochimaru hurried away, practically running from the tavern. Jiangju laughed at the sight. He didn't know what Xiaohei had up his sleeve, but watching Orochimaru flee was entertainment enough. He walked over and ruffled the panda's fur. "Xiaohei, you're great. Tonight I'll cook to celebrate." At the word cook, Xiaohei, who had been content under Jiangju's hands, suddenly trembled and looked up at him with alarm. "Ju, you must be tired. Why don't we eat out tonight? There's a Turkish barbecue nearby. Let's try it." "Turkish barbecue? Don't worry, I learned from Stephen Joe myself." Jiangju said the name with a proud grin. "Stephen Joe, when did the god of cookery come to our tavern? Why didn't I know?" Xiaohei demanded. "A few days ago," Jiangju explained. "You were still asleep upstairs and missed him. I saw it was the god of cookery and begged him for tips. I even bought him a drink, so he taught me how to make glowing egg fried rice." He beamed with obvious pride. "Boss, are you going to cook?" Barry asked, curious. "You haven't tried my food yet," Jiangju said, nodding. "I've been practicing." He looked pleased. "Glowing egg fried rice, just wait. I can't wait to see your faces." Xiaohei's mouth watered at the thought. I can't imagine what glowing egg fried rice would be like. He wiped his drool with the back of his paw. "From the way Mr. Hay looks, I'm excited to taste it," Barry said, amused. He had faith that Jiangju, powerful as he was, could at least manage a decent meal. "Ha-ha, then I'll get started." Jiangju was practically glowing with happiness. Xiaohei had never been fond of cooking or eating what others made, and sometimes he'd sneak off to get a meal on his own. But now everything seemed different. Xiaohei actually wanted to eat what Jiangju cooked. "I'll owe Stephen Joe 3 drinks next time," Jiangju muttered to himself as he headed up to the second-floor kitchen. Downstairs, Xiaohei and Barry sat at the table, waiting. Xiaohei told Barry with excitement about the god of cookery and how he wanted to taste the legendary dishes, pissing meatballs and ecstasy rice. "You don't know, before Stephen Zhao became the god of cookery, he invented the pissing beef balls," Xiaohei gushed. "They were amazing, and after he ascended, his ecstasy rice is on another level. Every time I think about it, these South China Sea purple bamboos taste bland and pale." He held a piece of strange purple, crystalline bamboo between his paws and munched it like chocolate, clearly delighted. Barry didn't fully understand Xiaohei's culinary hero worship, but hearing that and seeing Xiaohei's enthusiasm made his own stomach grumble. A glass of energy wine had already left him a little hungry, and now he was eager to try Jiangju's cooking. "Egg fried rice is ready. Hehe. This one's going to be a success." I could already see the golden light when I was cooking, Jiangju announced, emerging from the kitchen with a tray and placing it on the table. "I'm going to dig in," Xiaohei declared loudly, no longer able to contain his excitement as he prepared to enjoy the meal Jiangju had made. Chapter 14, Lively Morning. Jiangju set a semicircular metal lid over the 2 steaming bowls of egg-fried rice, as if he were sealing in the first hint of sunlight. When Xiaohei climbed up on a chair and lifted the lid, a warm golden glow flooded out, washing everything in soft light. "Wow, it's actually glowing." Barry leaned in, eyes wide. The rice in both bowls shimmered faintly, haloed with that same golden hue. Xiaohei hesitated a moment, unsure. While Barry couldn't wait, he plucked off the lid entirely and peered in, momentarily dazzled by the brightness. "Hey, where's yours?" Barry looked around the table. There were only 2 bowls, no third serving for Jiangju. Jiangju merely shrugged. "I like to cook more than I like to eat. I've tricked him like this before." The aroma that rose when Barry scooped the first spoonful was irresistible. Xiao Hai sniffed, and finding nothing off, reached with a spoon as well. Both of them tasted the rice, then both of them froze. Their skin and fur took on a visible golden sheen, as if someone had poured sunlight over their bodies. For Xiao Hei, a red panda with a naturally furred face, the change was odd, but not dangerous. For Barry, who was human, it was alarming. His entire body turned gold, and he began to hum with a strange vibration, as if some internal motor had suddenly switched on. Golden sparks danced across Barry's skin. Xiao Hei's fur stood on end, each hair lit up like a tiny filament. Fur fluttered loose, drifted through the air, and settled on the floor, which only made the tavern look more ridiculous. "You tricked me again," Xiao Hei blurted, more embarrassed than angry, but his voice was drowned out by the sudden escalation. Barry's trembling intensified. He seemed to be vibrating at an impossible frequency. He bolted upright and began to run, knocking into tables and chairs. In moments, the small tavern had been turned upside down. Chairs were overturned, shelves crashed, cushions torn, and even the upstairs door rattled on its hinges. Jiangju snapped his fingers. The motion jolted Barry, who immediately toppled, rolled his eyes, and passed out with a soft thump. The tavern settled back into the exact state it had been in before the chaos, except for a few scattered tufts of fur on the floor. Heart-pounding, Jiangju checked Barry's breathing. He was alive, shallow, weak breaths, but alive. The idea that a meal might have killed someone made Jiangju's stomach drop. He had to be careful. For a moment, he considered erasing Barry's memory of the incident, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Memories weren't something to be meddled with lightly. They belonged to the person who lived them. Jiangju carried Barry to a back room and laid him on a bed. He glanced once at the brightly lit New York skyline beyond the window, yawned, locked up the tavern, and went to sleep. He needed rest. After all, fatigue showed on the face, and he wasn't about to start getting wrinkles. The next morning, Xiao Hai woke him with a vigorous pinch. No amount of begging loosened Xiao Hei's grip. Jiangju tried to escape using his ability, but in the scramble, he slipped on a bar of soap that had somehow found its way to the bathroom floor and came down hard. "Jiang Xiaoju, are you trying to kill me?" Xiao Hei demanded, appearing in the doorway, all indignation and bristling fur. "I am not your son. Don't call me that," Jiangju shot back, still on the floor. Xiao Hei sniffed and rounded on him. "You lied to me. You said your egg-fried rice was taught to you by the god of cookery." "I said Stephen Zhou taught me. It's the same thing," Jiangju protested. "I even didn't charge you drinks because of it." "You almost killed someone with those bowls." Xiao Hai's voice rose, equal parts furious and horrified. His eyes shimmered with moisture. "Are you trying to get me killed so goblins can move in here? Is that it? For one thing, you're a red panda, not a human. You don't just die," Jiangju said flatly. "And two, weren't you the one who couldn't stop repeating that I'd tricked you?" Barry passed out at the door, all right? They both turned as Barry peered into the room, blinking blearily. Seeing their stunned expressions, he flushed. He remembered taking a bite, then nothing. "I didn't misread anything about you two," Barry said quickly, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. His eyes met Xiao Hei's, and embarrassed, he offered a weak smile. Xiao Hei's hackles rose again. He made a face. Then, before he could bolt, Jiangju grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and pressed him down on the bed. "Sit still," he muttered. "Barry, I'm sorry. I didn't know what would happen," Jiangju said to their guest, sincere. Barry scratched his head. "It's fine. I remember the first bite, and then I passed out. I don't remember anything after that. Did something else happen?" "No, really, nothing," Jiangju said at once, trying to sound casual. Barry shrugged, waved goodbye, and left. When the door closed behind him, Jiangju felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He couldn't be sure Barry was telling the whole truth, but for now, the situation seemed to have been contained. Xiao Hei slumped back against the pillows and glared at Jiangju. "You should never have asked the god of cookery to teach you. You used to be able to tell a good dish from a bad one just by smell. Now you can't tell anything. It's a sin." He huffed and looked utterly betrayed by both cuisine and teacher. Chapter 15. Stephen Week. The whole egg-fried rice farce had finally died down. After breakfast, simple fare Barry had bought them, Jiangju and Xiao Hei went to the tavern. Jiang could have waved his hand, and had the place magically spotless, or given it an enchantment that cleaned itself. But that felt soulless. Unless he was exhausted or something went wrong, he liked cleaning the tavern himself. "Barry's been a headline on every news feed lately," Xiaohei said, scrolling through a tablet. "That's good, isn't it?" Jiangju replied, wearing a mask and wiping the counter. "But it's a little high profile. I don't trust whoever's paying attention to him." "He's a target then. My program's about to be cracked by S.H.I.E.L.D., Xiaohei snapped. "Then don't sit there. Help him," Jiang said casually. "Do you really think he can run around the city without backup?" "I did help, remember?" Xiaohei bit out. "That's why I cooked for you earlier." "You dare bring that up?" Jiangju groaned. The memory made his face go slack. On impulse, trying to recreate an anime effect with the egg-fried rice, he'd added something unnecessary, but not anything dangerous. Still, the embarrassment made him weak-kneed. "When the god of cookery shows up in person, I want him to make me a meal. You have to help me, or I'm going on strike," Xiaohei declared. "Strike?" Jiang laughed. "Who do you work for? If you go on strike, who's going to? What is even your job if not helping me?" Xiaohei snorted and refused to argue further. He knew from experience that once Jiang got sunshine in his eyes, he'd be impossible to stop. After years of companionship, he'd learned when not to push. When Jiangju finished tidying, he settled back at his usual seat and watched the city outside. The traffic hummed by like a living organism, vibrant, restless. He liked sitting in the tavern and looking out at it. The side door near the bookshelf opened. A man in a simple black suit stepped in, surveyed the room, and walked straight to the bar. He pressed the call button. "Mr. Zhou, welcome," Jiangju said, surprised to see him, and went to greet the newcomer. "Boss Jiang, that wine you poured that day, do you still have it?" the man asked with a secretive smile. "There's a rack by the TV. You can have it after you pay," Jiang nodded, pointing. "You want me to pay?" Mr. Zhou laughed. "How about I teach you how to cook instead?" "Teach me how to cook?" Jiang's expression flipped instantly. He nodded eagerly like a bird at rice. "All right, teach me first, then we'll drink. Boss Jiang's wine is the best." Jiang wasn't interested in the wine talk. His brain had already gone into cooking mode. He pulled Mr. Zhou up the stairs to the kitchen. Mr. Zhou opened Jiang's refrigerator and made a small, exaggerated sound of envy. "Every time I see your fridge, Boss Jiang, I get a little jealous." "If you like it, it's yours," Jiang said, scratching the back of his head. "So what do you want to learn today?" "Did you master that egg-fried rice from last time?" Mr. Zhou asked. "Of course, there's nothing I can't learn," Jiang declared confidently, conveniently forgetting yesterday's messy aftermath. "You're amazing. Why don't you just float up to heaven?" Mr. Zhou teased, then fished for a cigarette only to find he couldn't light it. "No smoking in the kitchen, Mr. Zhou," Jiang said calmly. Right, I forgot the rules." Mr. Zhou shrugged. "Today's simplest thing in our school is the French steak." "I want to learn Chinese food," Jiang replied. "Fish-flavored shredded pork. I'm dying to know how chefs make pork taste like fish." Mr. Zhou laughed. "It's not that hard." He still had his skills. After a quick review, he gathered ingredients and began teaching Jiangju. 2 hours later, the lesson was done. Mr. Mai Zhou had his fish-flavored shredded pork, drank enough wine to be content, thanked Jiang, and left. Moments after Mr. Zhou stepped out, Xiaohei, who had been asleep on the cat tree, yawned and stretched. "Hey, did someone come in while I was napping?" "Yeah, Mr. Rat. Zhou was here," Jiang answered. Then he looked at Xiaohei oddly. "You actually slept the whole morning. That's weird." "You sure it wasn't because of that meal yesterday?" Xiaohei muttered, still annoyed. "Which Mr. Zhou was it?" "Zhou Yu." "Stephen Zhou," Jiang said happily. "Zhou Xing. I learned another dish today, fish-flavored shredded pork. Want to try it?" "Stephen Zhou? The god of cookery?" Xiaohei's eyes snapped open. "The god of cookery was here and you didn't wake me up?" "What god of cookery?" Jiang waved a hand. "It's Stephen Zhou. He's good, sure, but not some deity. He's nowhere near the god of cookery." "Show me," Xiaohei demanded instead of arguing further. Jiang used a bit of magic and rewound the entrance, letting Xiaohei watch the scene clearly. "Oh," Xiaohei's tone fell. "So that was the younger Stephen Zhou. I was hoping for the real one. I waited for nothing. Next time he shows up, I'm going to—" "Ha, so that's it. After he became the god of cookery, is his food all that different?" Jiang asked, curious. When did we even watch that movie? I remember it, but not long after you enlightened me, Xiaohei said, rolling his eyes. I watched it alone when you were out. But it's not just about whether the food tastes better. It's the feeling, like how you light up when you see Barry, or how you glare at Tony Stark. It's that. Devotion. Hate iron but not steel, Zhang blurted, confused. I'm not his father, Xiaohei snorted. What I mean is, when someone reaches that level of craft, it's like they reshape you. If you like him so much, be patient. Time is a good sculptor. The person you want to meet will appear when the time's right. Chapter 16. Tony Stark. On a cliff above Malibu stood a lone mansion, the kind of place that made headlines and whispered rumors in equal measure. It belonged to a man known around the world, though not everyone quite knew the full story behind the name. A sleek black sedan eased up the drive and stopped in front of the house. A blonde in a tailored gray suit stepped out, smoothed her skirt, and tapped on the driver's window. Happy, wait for me for half an hour, she called. Happy, slightly round and ever faithful behind the wheel, answered with a tired grin. Half an hour? You know he didn't even show up this morning. He's probably still in the lab. Pepper gave him a look of mock severity. I'm saying the mess inside can be cleared in half an hour. Mess? Happy teased. What kind of mess are we talking about? Pepper shrugged. Given our boss, disposable, non-recyclable. With that parting shot, she walked up the steps toward the mansion. The front door opened automatically as she approached. Inside the living room, a small war zone greeted her. Clothes and glassware scattered, a chaise overturned. Pepper let out a soft sigh and started to tidy. She picked through a pile of torn fabric, raised an eyebrow at the carnage, then pulled a spare set of clothes from the side cabinet. Hey, I thought I was the only one last night. The voice was husky. Pepper didn't need to turn to know the woman in question was in rough shape. When she did look, she saw a dark-haired woman wrapped in sheets, hair a mess, leaning against the wall and blinking blearily at the ceiling. Her makeup was streaked and she rubbed her forehead. It was obvious she had drunk too much and slept too little. You were the only one yesterday. I was his life assistant, the woman mumbled. Pepper offered a professional smile. You can go freshen up. There's a full set of clothes in there. If you want to leave, there's a car waiting out front. Life assistant? The woman repeated, then rubbed her temples. Sorry, I don't even know what I'm saying. I have a splitting headache. Pepper only shrugged. The woman was an up-and-coming model who couldn't turn down commitments, even if they came with complications. She accepted Pepper's help without a fight, showered, changed into respectable clothes, ate a simple breakfast. Pepper set out with quiet efficiency and left without drama. Pepper had made the food out of courtesy more than anything else. Once the model had gone, Pepper picked up a tray, coffee, sandwiches, eggs, and bacon, and headed for the lab below without waking the house's ever-watchful butler. The door to the subterranean lab slid open, and she found her boss hunched over a robotic arm. Good morning, Pepper, Tony said casually without looking up. It's noon, Tony, she replied flatly. Eat something. Tony grinned and lifted the coffee cup. Is this the legendary love breakfast everyone claims I get? Pepper ignored the teasing and gestured at the arm he was tinkering with. There's a board meeting this afternoon. You missed the morning session. I hate talking to a room full of old men and their wives. They just need to sit and count their dividends. I can handle the company. He took a complacent bite of the sandwich. They say you've been burning through cash and haven't delivered anything new, Pepper said. Tony waved a hand. They've just forgotten what happens when I get bored. He set the arm aside and spoke aloud. Jarvis, push the Jericho schematic I developed years ago to Stark Industries servers. Tell production to start runs. Understood, sir, came Jarvis's calm reply through the lab speakers. See? Problem solved, Tony said, turning to get the praise he craved. Pepper's expression didn't change. So about this afternoon. She had only brought up the board meeting to get him to behave later. If she told him plainly, he'd find a way to test whatever he'd invented right before the critical presentation. You're giving a speech at Imperial University in New York tomorrow. You already agreed, she continued. Tony blinked, clearly struggling to place it. I agreed? When? Where? A month ago. Cocktail party, on a bed in the upstairs lounge. Pepper's voice was level. Tony's face went a faint shade of red. He scratched his nose, the embarrassed humor of a man who'd never quite grown out of being a charming screw-up. Right. Well, I just want to go to New York to try out that Flash takeout place. The Flash? Pepper arched an eyebrow. You mean the new speedster? You're actually interested in him? Tony folded his arms and strode over to the main display. Of course. I want to know how he does it. With a few words to Jarvis, the screens lit up with grainy footage of a scarlet blur saving people, snatching them from harm in a blink. When I watch him, Tony said, leaning closer, his velocity must sometimes exceed the speed of sound. And? Pepper asked. Tony tapped the screen to zoom. Look at this. Every time he rescues someone, their clothes, their hair, nothing changes. They don't look like they just went from 0 to ridiculous speeds without a second of acceleration. Their bodies should be torn apart by inertial forces or at least show signs of buffer shock. Instead, it's as if they never moved. He stared at the images, frustration and fascination warring on his face. It's unscientific. Chapter 17. Cisco, Who Works Hard. Barry stepped out of the tavern, unaware he was being watched by someone with more than a casual interest. He moved on autopilot, following the little system Xiaohai had set up for him and tapping through the prompts to accept his next delivery. Can I just take a break? He muttered to himself as he shot down the street in his damaged combat suit. With Team Flash out of commission, the costume had taken a beating, but for the first time in a while, Barry felt oddly at ease, free for a moment, from the endless arguments, the transformations, the crisis of identity. If it weren't for the sense of duty and the moral compass his parents and Joe had instilled in him, he might have stayed. He couldn't help thinking, though, about Harrison and the rest. What were they doing now? He found himself on the roof of the Empire State Building, wind whipping the city around him, staring into the distance and wondering. 3 months earlier, a discarded newspaper had fluttered in the same wind. Its headline blared, "The Flash Disappears." The photo beside it was unmistakable. The date at the top was 3 months ago. Inside Star Labs, a pale, exhausted young man with greasy, unkempt hair and bloodshot eyes tapped away at a computer. Empty pizza boxes and takeout containers cluttered the desk. A cooling cup of coffee sat nearby. Cisco Ramon, Cisco, to some, looked like he'd been running on nothing but caffeine and stubbornness for days. "Cisco, please rest," Caitlin urged in a tired, hoarse voice. She'd shed her lab coat. She sat in something comfortable, her face soft with sleepiness and worry. Cisco downed another bitter gulp of black coffee. The jolt seemed to bring a grin to his face. "Trust me, Caitlin," he said. "For once I think I'm right. I found something about Barry and the doctor's disappearance. I can find them." Caitlin sighed. She was bone-tired, but she kept encouraging him. He was the only one who seemed to be holding on to hope. After several failed leads, she had started to give up, but she stayed to keep an eye on Cisco. He was the one refusing to let go. 3 months ago, Barry Allen had vanished. The team had been frantic. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Barry might have traveled through time, and that Harrison Wells had disappeared with him, gone in an instant. Fear and grief spread through their small circle, and as the weeks passed, outside of Caitlin, Cisco, Ronnie, and Dr. Stein, people started moving on. Even public opinion settled on a convenient story. Barry had gone abroad to study. In the meantime, with the Flash gone, Midtown had been hammered by a new wave of metahuman criminals. Ronnie and Dr. Stein came back to help control the outbreak, and another hero, calling himself the Atom, emerged to restore order. When people learned the Atom's identity, many were surprised. Ray Palmer, chairman of the Palmer Group from Star City. With Firestorm and the Atom defending the streets, the city slowly forgot the red streak that used to save it. "I did it! I'm a genius!" Cisco shouted suddenly, his excitement slicing through the gloom and bringing Caitlin back to the present. "What is it?" she asked. "I did it, Caitlin. I really did. I cracked something. I can find them." Cisco beamed. Then his body went limp. He slumped forward onto the keyboard and was out cold. Caitlin rushed to him and checked his pulse, then let out a relieved laugh. He'd simply passed out from exhaustion. But there was another problem. A new metahuman was wreaking havoc, and Dr. Stein and the others were tied up, so who else could they call but Joe West, Barry's adoptive father? By the time Caitlin had hung up the line and prepped an IV in case Cisco needed it, Joe West had stepped out of the elevator. Tall, broad, older than the others, Joe's face was creased with worry as he took in the scene. "How is he?" Joe asked, though Barry was the thought behind his eyes. "He just collapsed from exhaustion," Caitlin said. "He's okay for now. Thank you for coming." "Let me help," Joe said without hesitation. He lifted Cisco carefully and carried him into the med bay, laid him on a bed, then sank down onto a chair beside him to catch his breath. Caitlin handed him a cup of coffee and explained what Cisco had said before he passed out. "He said he'd succeeded," she told Joe. "So maybe he found a lead, but he hasn't slept." "You should rest," Joe said, looking at Caitlin. "I'll stay with Cisco." Caitlin wanted to refuse, but she was spent, physically and mentally. Ronnie had gone out again whenever there was trouble, leaving Caitlin to shoulder lab work and watch over the city, and the stress had worn her down. She didn't go home. Ronnie had warned he might not be back. Instead, she went to her old bedroom at Estar, fell onto the bed, and slept the way someone sleeps when they have nothing left to give. Joe, who still kept up with his police training despite the years, nodded off on the sofa beside the medbay, exhausted in his own way. They all slept until morning. As soon as everyone woke, the quiet resolve returned. Cisco, or rather, Cisco and Dr. Stein, set to work on the device Cisco had sketched in a fevered state the night before. It was crude, rough around the edges, cobbled from spare parts in desperation, but it had a purpose. An energy emitter meant to open a breach at the exact spot Barry had vanished, and a second instrument meant to lock onto his energy signature once the rift was open. They had nothing to lose but time, and they were going to tear down whatever kept Barry and Harrison Wells away until they brought them home. Chapter 18, Identity Exposed. They stood in the same alley where Barry Allen had vanished 3 months ago, the alley where Harrison Wells had vanished too. It was late, only the streetlights hummed above them. Around the crackling equipment were members of Estar Labs, Cisco Rahman, Ronnie Raymond, Caitlin Snow, Dr. Martin Stein, and Joe West, Barry's adoptive father. Joe had kept a secret for 3 months. He still hadn't told his daughter that Barry was the Flash. Even though she'd moved out to live with her boyfriend, Joe hadn't let go. She demanded, "If you want me to come back, tell me Barry's secret." Joe had refused. He wasn't willing to hand someone else's life over so casually. If Barry's identity were exposed, chaos could follow. "Dr. Stein, what do we do now?" Joe asked, scanning the empty street. Stein glanced at Cisco, who was hunched over the strange device they'd brought, the so-called dark matter space-time cannon, a name Cisco had insisted on. "Cisco and I ran the numbers over and over. I think we can do it. We can breach the barrier and bring him back. But there's a problem we have to consider." "What could be more important than finding Barry?" Ronnie asked. Stein hesitated. "We all assume Barry vanished because he traveled through time, but the rest of the world hasn't shifted. That means either Barry's trapped in the time stream or he hasn't actually returned to whatever past he went to. The bigger question is, what about Dr. Wells?" Caitlin frowned. "What do you mean about Dr. Wells?" Cisco straightened, shutting off his diagnostics long enough to speak. "It's simple. Everything we know about Barry disappearing and how the rest of the world stayed the same implies that everyone here was unaffected by the change, except one person." He tapped the cannon with one finger and flicked another switch on the console. The device hummed as it charged. "If Wells isn't from this timeline," Ronnie began. "Then he's not who he says he is," Caitlin finished. Joe's face went hard. "If he's not from this timeline, then who is he?" Cisco's voice dropped. "Reverse Flash." He said it like a wound. "Harrison Wells is probably the Reverse Flash." "Impossible," Caitlin said. "We were there when both of them appeared. What? There's no other explanation for why, when Barry disappeared, Wells disappeared too." Cisco looked up at the starry sky for a long breath. The yellow silhouette Barry saw as a kid, that was a man from the future. That yellow figure who killed Nora Allen, that's the Reverse Flash. He came back here, changed the timeline. If Wells is from that future, it explains a lot. Joe scowled. "But if he's the Reverse Flash, why would he help Barry become the Flash? Why build Estar Labs, help him train?" Cisco's jaw tightened. "Maybe without Barry the Flash, Wells himself doesn't exist. or he loses whatever powers keep him tied to his original timeline. Maybe he needed Barry to ensure the past unfolded a certain way so he could get back. I don't know for sure. Part of that is my analysis, and part of it came to me in a nightmare. I dreamed I was killed by reverse lightning. He swallowed. If Wells is the Reverse Flash, he'll figure out we know eventually. So before we try to rescue Barry, we have to control ourselves. Don't give him a reason to run. Everyone fell silent, then nodded. They couldn't not rescue Barry just because Wells might be a future enemy. But restraint was something they would need. Stein keyed in the last of his calculations. The cannon's coils began to scream with stored energy. Cisco and Ronnie watched the readouts while Caitlin stood a safe distance away. Joe kept his hand close to his holster. Every muscle coiled. They fired. The first beam struck the air where the wormhole had been and was swallowed by a shimmering field of energy. The beam dissipated harmlessly midair. "Our guess is right," Cisco said, heart pounding. "Increase the output." Stein's fingers flew across the keyboard. The cannon wound up again, louder this time. The second blast pushed through the shimmering field and pierced it, but the wormhole winked out as quickly as it had appeared. They fired a third time, then a fourth. Each blast ran the same course. The cannon fought a strange resistance in the alley, then punched a hole through it long enough to make them hopeful. On the fifth attempt, the air tore open like paper. The familiar tatter of displaced time hung for a heartbeat, then collapsed in on itself. And where the tear closed, a figure stumbled out and hit the pavement about 20 feet away. Everyone froze as the man on the ground pushed himself up slowly and looked at them. He smiled, as calm and polite as ever. "Looks like you managed to breach the temporal barrier," Harrison Wells said. "You've been busy." Joe's hand snapped to his holster, and he leveled the gun, though the pistol felt absurdly small in the face of whatever Wells might be. "Harrison Wells," Joe barked. "What the hell did you do to my son? Where is Barry?" Wells chuckled and reached into his coat. With a casual flick, he tapped something on his ring. A yellow uniform rolled out and unfurled in a blur. In an instant, the man who had been standing there as Harrison Wells was gone, replaced by the yellow lightning blur of the Reverse Flash. Cisco let out a sharp noise of outrage. "Don't." Reverse Flash held up his hand, and even through the armor, his voice sounded like a blade. "Relax. I'm stuck here until I get Barry Allen back. For now, our goals align." "Get away from him," Ronnie said. "We need to bring Barry home." Reverse Flash laughed softly. "You're causing a lot of trouble." He glanced toward the shrinking tier in reality. "I didn't want a confrontation so soon. Next time we meet, we won't be allies. It's a shame." He turned his gaze to Cisco, and something like amusement flickered across his face. "Cisco, I've always considered you like a son." Joe's finger tightened on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Whatever else the future might hold, tonight Harrison Wells, whoever he truly was, had just walked back through time. And he was right. For the moment, their interests matched. For the moment, the priority was getting Barry Allen home. Chapter 19. Reverse Lightning. Harrison Wells had woken with holes in his memory. An instant earlier, he'd been furious at the sudden disappearance of the Flash. He'd been ready to tear the city apart looking for Barry Allen. If the Flash vanished and the timeline began to overwrite itself, Wells's own existence might be at stake. He had killed Barry's mother in another time. He hadn't erased Barry entirely, because the boy still existed. But when Barry had traveled through time and reset the timeline, he'd temporarily lost his connection to the Speed Force. Wells had decided then to let Barry become the Flash, to nudge parts of history and accelerate the right events, all in the hope of finding his way back to his original timeline. Everything had been proceeding according to that plan. And then something happened. Wells couldn't recall the later part. There was a blank, a cold, choking gap, swallowing what should have been his memory. He snapped his eyes open only to find himself on the floor instead of in his wheelchair. Dr. Stein and Ronnie were there. They explained enough for him to get his bearings. He stood and, without pretense, admitted who he was. A time rift, wrenched open by Cisco and the team, hung in the air nearby, its edges humming with the leftover Speed Force energy that had belonged to Barry. Wells didn't think. He ran. He tapped into the remaining current of Speed Force and pushed himself through the wormhole. Inside, something utterly unexpected waited, a wooden door floating in the middle of the time stream. Wells tried to stop, but his recent burst of speed carried him through the threshold before he could react. He landed in a strange tavern. The room smelled of strong tea and older things. Behind the bar stood a man in a yellow robe, bald, smiling like he'd been expecting guests. A one-eyed old man in a gray suit sat at a corner table, and a few others lounged about, their clothing and mannerisms making them look as though they'd stepped out of some period drama. "Wow, the famous reverse flash," said the man in the yellow robe, amusement spilling from his voice. "Welcome to the tavern." Wells blinked, every instinct screaming to pull a weapon, to analyze, to bolt back to the wormhole. He found he couldn't use his speed, at least not at first, and the absence left him unnerved. If this place was some hidden corner of the multiverse, it wasn't one he recognized. "Who are you?" he growled. "I'm the owner," the man said, grinning. "Jiang Ju. Call me Boss Jiang, and change out of that suit, will you? If Barry comes back here, he might start a fight. I don't want my tavern wrecked." Wells tensed. "What kind of place is this?" "It's another universe," Jiang said, shrugging casually. "Not a parallel world, another universe entirely. And yes, you can use your powers here." At Jiang's words, something shifted. Wells felt the old current of speed return to him like a faint electrical pulse under his skin. He hadn't wanted to admit it, but the relief washed across his features even though his face was masked. Whoever this Jiangju was, he'd done something to restore a portion of Wells's abilities. "Do you have clothes?" Wells asked. He could not, under any circumstance, wear that suit over whatever he'd been wearing before. Jiang reached into the air as if it were a pocket and produced a set of clothes and, to Wells's immediate shock, a wheelchair. The garments were his own. The chair was his. Wells's eyes narrowed. He half expected some trick, some trap. Instead, Jiang simply shrugged, as though pulling the items from nowhere were no more remarkable than producing a glass of water. Jiang knew Wells was a villain. That much was clear. But he also seemed to know that Barry needed Wells, that despite everything Wells had done, he was the man who could train Barry, who could push the new Flash to be fast enough to contend with the altered world. Because of Wells's actions, metahuman phenomena had appeared sooner than they should have, and the Flash's raw speed hadn't yet adjusted to keep pace. Wells changed. He considered using the moment to take hostages, to leverage his way back home, but the look on the faces around him, calm, almost knowingly amused, cut through his intent. "You're not a very honest man," Jiang said, then softened a fraction. "Do you want a drink? You don't get a mixed one, though. Don't like you enough for that." "A soda," Wells said instead, and took the wheelchair to a quiet table. Jiang produced a tall, ice-cold soda from some other place and set it in front of him. He sat opposite Wells and watched him like someone observing a curious insect. "What happened after Barry left?" Jiang asked finally. "How did Barry come into this universe?" Wells gave a tired, controlled account. "I don't know how long it's been. After Barry vanished, I seemed to vanish as well. Cisco and the others found the energy left behind in Heim Rift and opened a gap. I showed up then." "So Team Flash discovered your identity?" Jiang asked, the small disappointment in his voice obvious. "Yes." Wells's laugh was humorless. Years of scheming had been upended by a single, unstable event. "They discovered me after Barry disappeared. That ruined a lot of plans." Jiang slammed a hand on the table and stood up, the motion drawing the room's attention. "Damn it." He looked contrite for a moment, then forced a grin. "Sorry, I got a little excited." "You seem to care about Barry," Wells said, as if it were a casual observation. "Yes," Jiang said simply. He reached out and touched Wells's forehead, and the reverse speed force that lived in Wells's body receded under his touch like shadow under light. Wells jerked back, startled. The sensation left him hollow and raw. "What did you do?" he demanded, panic sharpening his voice. "Compensation for the damage to my door," Jiang said, and he glanced at a card in his hand. The surface of that card had shifted from dull to a burning gold red. "You wrecked my place." Wells felt the loss keenly, the speed that had been a part of him, stripped away. He tried to pull at whatever remained and found his powers muffled, distant. At that moment, a familiar presence filled the doorway. Barry Allen walked in, eyes bright as they scanned the room. He slowed when he saw Jiangju, then relaxed a little. Then his expression shifted entirely as he spotted Harrison Wells seated across the room. Barry moved toward them, cautious and then unexpectedly buoyant. According to Jiang's earlier promise, this was the place Barry could go back from. His face lit up with a childlike glee. "Today is a day worth celebrating, Barry," Jiang said, his voice warm. "I've got a gift for you." Chapter 20. Attacks and Misunderstandings. Today's delivery put Barry in the same place as a certain legendary playboy, Tony Stark. Barry had learned enough about this world to feel indifferent, if not a little put off, by people like Tony. Still, the man had offered a huge tip, and Barry wasn't the type to throw away that kind of money. So he was at the Imperial University of New York, carrying a hot burrito and a lunchbox. The Speed Force kept the food warm despite his rapid travel. Where exactly was Tony supposed to be? The message had only said, "at the venue." If it weren't for the $100,000 payout, Barry would never have bothered, he grumbled to himself as he stood in front of a building. Students were pouring out from all directions into the temporarily arranged outdoor space. The crowd was thickening. Good, Tony should show up any moment. Tony did, predictably dramatic, an ostentatious purple suit, charisma pouring off him. He hadn't even gotten his first line out when a gunshot cracked. Barry's whole body flashed with golden light. The Speed Force focused his perception. He saw the sniper round on its trajectory toward the podium. He snatched up the lunchbox, blurred across the path of the bullet, grabbed the round, and stopped beside Tony Stark. "That's my takeaway," Tony smiled, as if this were some charming party trick. "Looks like your delivery guy isn't just a delivery guy," Barry snapped, holding out the lunchbox and the bullet. "There's a sniper here. You need to get out of—" "I'm actually more interested in you than the sniper," Tony said, eyes flicking to the bullet on the lunchbox. For a moment his expression shifted, then he was calm again. Another gunshot rang out. Barry's hand moved before he quite registered doing it. He caught the second bullet and scanned the surroundings. Even with the Speed Force, identifying a concealed sniper, possibly positioned far off school grounds, wasn't easy. "If you stay," Barry said, "it won't stop. You can't risk everyone here." Tony considered him for a beat. "You're right." He didn't sound willing to gamble with innocent students' lives. "Will you escort me out?" "I'll take you somewhere the sniper can't reach," Barry said. "I'm not letting any of these kids be hurt." "Thanks, kid in red." Tony's thank you was stiff and slightly graceless, typical Tony, but Barry had no time to parse it. He scooped Tony up, and in an instant they were at the school's administrative building. Tony felt the world tilt and change with a speed that made his stomach lurch. "Whoa, that's fast!" He braced himself against the wall, steadying his breathing. "Jarvis, can you pick up any signal?" "Yes. The tracker hasn't been disturbed," Jarvis replied calmly. "You can't get away now." Tony smiled slightly despite himself. As much as it felt odd to owe his life to a stranger, his scientific curiosity flared. He was fascinated by the Flash. "I'll call Happy and have someone pick me up, and I'll look into who tried to take a shot." Jarvis acknowledged the orders. Tony's excitement over the fact a tracker was active on the Flash was obvious. For a moment, the threat of assassination became secondary to the possibility of studying Barry. A block away, on a rooftop, the sniper's hands shook as he dismantled his rifle into small pieces and shoved them into a case. He forced a call through on his phone. "Was it successful?" demanded the voice at the other end. "Failed," the sniper managed. "The Flash appeared. The guy, he caught the bullet." There was a short, sharp silence before the voice barked. "Keep your eyes on the news. If you lied to me, you'll regret it." The call ended. The sniper lobbed his phone away, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked off the roof. The presence of the Flash had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. He walked on, jaw tight, thinking about the invitation he'd received days before and what failing would mean. Back at the venue, people were stunned by how quickly Tony had vanished and by the appearance of the Flash. A few in the crowd who still had sharp ears heard the gunshots and realized what had happened. Panic threatened to sweep the audience, but Barry had already helped several people escape dangerous spots. Without him, the announcement that the Flash had shown up at their school might have caused a real stampede. Once Tony's bodyguards arrived on the scene, Barry slipped away. He did lose out on the delivery tip. Tony's men took over, and Barry left empty-handed. He barely had time to be annoyed before he spotted someone else who made the day worthwhile. Dr. Harrison Wells, Jiangju, was sitting in the tavern. Seeing him made Barry's mood brighten instantly. He'd been looking forward to talking with Harrison. "Barry, I've got a present for you," Harrison said with an easy smile the moment Barry sat down. "Doctor, huh? I wasn't expecting to see you today," Barry replied, returning the smile and settling in for a proper conversation. Harrison reached into his bag and produced a small ring engraved with a lightning bolt emblem. He followed it with something that made Barry freeze, the yellow suit Barry had been missing. Barry's smile died. The happiness he'd been feeling evaporated into cold disbelief. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, voice tight. Harrison's smile wavered. "Scared? Let me—" "Stop!" Barry cut him off before he could explain. His eyes were suddenly sharp and wet. "That's the Flash's uniform. How do you have it, Harrison?" He couldn't quite keep the accusation out of his voice. "Is it you?"